There was a time when Mia believed in forever. She and Ethan had been together since college, a love so deep it felt unshakable. They had dreams of a home filled with laughter, of late-night talks about the future, of waking up every morning knowing they were each other's person. But life had a cruel way of rewriting fairy tales. Mia still remembered the exact moment she realized Ethan had changed. It wasn't sudden, not like a bolt of lightning or a dramatic outburst. No, it was slow. Like the fading of a once bright candle. The messages became fewer, the calls less frequent, the touch more distant. At first she convinced herself it was just stress, that Ethan was dealing with things he wasn't ready to share. She waited, hoping, believing, until waiting turned into suffering. Then came the silence. A deafening, crushing silence that stretched on for 5 years. It started after Ethan got his dream job at a prestigious firm. He had always been ambitious, and Mia supported him in everything. She was his anchor, cheering him on through late-night study sessions, celebrating every milestone, and even sacrificing her own dreams to help him chase his. But once he got there, once he reached the top, he stopped looking back. The excuses piled up like autumn leaves. "I'm busy, Mia. You know how demanding work is. Let's talk later." But later never came. Mia spent nights staring at the ceiling, wondering where she went wrong. She tried to keep the love alive. She surprised him at his office, only to be met with irritation. She planned romantic dinners that ended with him scrolling through emails. And the worst part? The way he looked at her changed. Gone was the adoration, the passion, the tenderness. In its place was indifference. One evening she finally confronted him. "Ethan, do you even love me anymore?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Mia, I don't have time for this right now." And that was it. No fight. No grand breakup scene. Just indifference. That night she packed her bags and left. He didn't stop her. He didn't chase her. And that hurt more than anything. The first year without Ethan was a blur of heartbreak and unanswered questions. Mia wanted closure, but how do you get closure when someone simply stops caring? She tried dating, but every man felt like a shadow of what she once had. The memories of Ethan haunted her, his scent, his touch, the way his lips curved when he smiled. But time was a cruel teacher, forcing her to face the truth. Ethan had moved on. And if she didn't, she would be trapped in a love that no longer existed. So she built herself up from the wreckage. She pursued her own dreams, the ones she had put aside for him. She traveled, learned new skills, and most importantly, she fell in love with herself again. And then she met Ryan. Ryan was nothing like Ethan. Where Ethan was cold, Ryan was warm. Where Ethan was distant, Ryan was present. He listened, really listened, to every word she said. He made her feel seen, cherished, loved in ways she had forgotten were possible. It wasn't an easy love, not at first. Mia was hesitant, her heart still carrying the wounds of the past. But Ryan was patient. He held her hand through every fear, every doubt, until one day she realized. She had moved on. Ryan proposed on a quiet evening under a sky full of stars. And for the first time in years, Mia didn't hesitate. He said yes. Just when she thought she had finally closed the chapter on Ethan, fate had other plans. It happened on a regular afternoon. Mia was at a cafe, sipping her usual caramel latte, when a familiar voice made her freeze. "Mia." She turned, and there he was. Ethan. He looked different, tired, as if life had drained the fire from his eyes. His once pristine suit was slightly disheveled, and there was something vulnerable in the way he looked at her. "Mia, I..." He hesitated, his hands clenching. "I've been looking for you." Her heart pounded, but not for the reasons it once did. There was no rush of love, no longing. Just a quiet realization that she no longer belonged to him. Mia straightened her shoulders, meeting his gaze without wavering. "Why now, Ethan?" He exhaled sharply. "I was a fool. I let work consume me. I thought I had all the time in the world, but I lost you. And I regret it every single day." She studied him, waiting for the emotions to hit, the anger, the pain, the love. But all she felt was nothing. "I moved on, Ethan," she said softly, watching the flicker of devastation cross his face. I waited for you. For years I waited. But you never came back. I know, he whispered. And it's my biggest regret. There was a time when those words would have been everything she wanted to hear. But now, they were just echoes of a past she no longer lived in. Ethan looked down, his fingers tightening around his coffee cup. Is there someone else? Mia smiled softly. Yes. A shadow passed over his face, and for the first time in years she saw it, the pain of losing her. But it was too late. Standing up, she placed a hand on his shoulder, a silent farewell. I hope you find happiness, Ethan. I really do. And with that she walked away toward a future that was hers, truly hers for the first time in a long time. Ethan had ignored her for 5 years, believing she'd always be there. But life had moved forward. And so had she. Mia walked out of that cafe feeling lighter than she had in years. Seeing Ethan again should have stirred something deep within her, old wounds, buried emotions, unresolved pain. And yet she felt nothing. Not anger. Not love. Not regret. Just peace. It was strange, really, how time could erode even the deepest of heartaches. There was a time when Ethan's name alone could shatter her. But now, he was just another piece of her past, a man she had once loved but had long since outgrown. As she stepped onto the bustling city street, she took a deep breath, inhaling the crisp evening air. Life had finally moved forward, and so had she. And she had Ryan to thank for that. Ethan sat in the cafe long after Mia had gone, staring blankly at the untouched coffee before him. He had imagined this reunion 1,000 times, playing different scenarios in his head. Maybe she'd still be angry, maybe she'd cry, maybe she'd give him a chance to explain. But he never expected indifference. That cut deeper than anything. He had lost her. Truly, irreversibly lost her. For years he had told himself that Mia would always be there. That she understood his ambition, his need to succeed. He convinced himself that she would wait because their love was strong enough to withstand time. But time had proven him wrong. Mia had moved on. With someone else. And for the first time in his life, Ethan felt the unbearable weight of regret settle in his chest. That evening, Mia returned home to the life she had built without Ethan, a life she cherished. As soon as she stepped into her apartment, the scent of Ryan's cologne greeted her. He was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of homemade pasta, his sleeves rolled up, his hair slightly tousled. He looked up and grinned. Hey, you're home early. Mia's heart swelled at the sight of him. Yeah, I, ran into someone today. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Someone important? She hesitated before nodding. Ethan. For a moment Ryan's face remained unreadable, but then he sighed, setting down the wooden spoon. How did that go? Mia walked over and wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. Better than I expected. It made me realize how much I've moved on. Ryan turned in her arms, his blue eyes searching hers. Are you okay? She smiled, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. More than okay. Ryan studied her for a moment longer before nodding. Good. As I was thinking. Maybe we should start planning the wedding. Mia's breath hitched. It was a conversation they had danced around for months. They were engaged, yes, but they had taken things slow, wanting to enjoy the moment. But now, hearing Ryan say it so casually, so confidently, it filled her with warmth. She nodded. Let's do it. Ryan grinned, leaning down to kiss her. And as their lips met, Mia knew without a doubt she was exactly where she was meant to be. That night Ethan found himself drowning in the past. He went home to an empty apartment, the silence pressing in on him like a heavy weight. For the first time in years he found himself digging through old memories, photos of him and Mia, old texts that he had never deleted, the letters she had written him back when she still believed in their love. She had loved him so deeply, so completely. And he had thrown it all away. Why? Because he had been too blind to see what he had. Too caught up in his own world to appreciate the one person who had stood by him unconditionally. He had taken her for granted. And now she was gone. Ethan closed his eyes, gripping the edges of an old photograph, the two of them at a beach, smiling, his arms wrapped around her. He used to think they had forever. But forever had run out. Days passed and Mia threw herself into wedding preparations. She and Ryan visited venues, tasted cakes, picked out floral arrangements. It was exciting, overwhelming, and surreal all at once. But more than anything, it was healing. With every decision, she felt herself stepping further away from her past, cementing her future with Ryan. Yet there were moments, small, fleeting moments, when she thought of Ethan. Not with longing, but with curiosity. Was he okay? Did he regret it? Did it even matter anymore? She pushed those thoughts aside, focusing on the man who had chosen her, who had never made her question her worth. Ryan was her future. And nothing, not even Ethan, could change that. One evening, just a week before Mia and Ryan were set to finalize their wedding date, she received an unexpected message. "Ethan, can we meet? Just once. Please." Mia stared at the screen, her heart hammering. For 5 years she had waited for him to care. And now, when she had finally moved on, he wanted to talk? Part of her wanted to ignore it, to let him fade away like he had once done to her. But another part, perhaps the part that needed true closure, knew she had to face him one last time. She took a deep breath and typed her response. "Mia, one last time. Tomorrow. 6 p.m. The old bookstore." And just like that, the past came knocking once more. The next evening, Mia arrived at the bookstore, her heart steady. She wasn't nervous. Not anymore. Ethan was already there, waiting, looking more disheveled than she had ever seen him. His eyes lit up when he saw her, but there was something else there too, something she couldn't quite place. "Mia," he breathed, standing as she approached. She nodded, keeping a careful distance. "You wanted to talk." He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling shakily. "I don't even know where to start. The beginning usually helps." He gave a humorless chuckle, then sighed. "I screwed up, Mia. I know that now. I thought I had all the time in the world. That you would always be there." She remained silent, waiting. "I let work consume me. I let life pull me away from the one person who ever truly loved me. And by the time I realized what I had lost, it was too late." Mia's throat tightened, but she held firm. "Yes, Ethan. It was too late." He swallowed hard. "Is it? Really?" A flicker of something, desperation, hope, passed over his face. Mia shook her head. "I love Ryan, Ethan. I'm marrying him." His jaw clenched. "Do you love him the way you loved me?" She hesitated only for a second, but that second was enough for Ethan to see what he wanted to see. Mia exhaled. "Love changes, Ethan. It evolves. What I had with you was real. But it ended. And what I have with Ryan, it's my future." He looked away, his fists clenched. I just thought maybe." "There is no maybe, Ethan," she said softly. "There's only what is. And what is that I have moved on." Silence stretched between them, heavy and final. After a long moment, Ethan nodded. "I understand." Mia gave him one last look, then turned and walked away. And this time Ethan didn't stop her. Mia stepped into the cool night air, inhaling deeply. She had faced her past. She had made her choice. And now she was free. As she walked toward her car, her phone buzzed. "Ryan, can't wait to see you tonight. I love you." Mia smiled, her heart swelling. She didn't need to look back anymore. Her future was waiting, and she was ready to embrace it. Mia sat on her apartment balcony, staring at the engagement ring resting in her palm. It no longer felt like a symbol of love. It felt like a lie, a weight pressing against her chest, suffocating her. The man she was supposed to marry, the man she had trusted, had orchestrated her pain. Ryan had manipulated her, twisted reality, and pushed her toward a decision she should have made on her own. And the worst part? She had loved him. Or at least she thought she had. Now she didn't know what to believe. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. For a moment she considered ignoring it, but then she sighed and stood, making her way to the entrance. When she opened the door, Ryan stood there, his face etched with sorrow. Mia's heart clenched. Seeing him like this, broken, vulnerable, it almost made her want to forgive him. Almost. I just need to talk, he said, his voice raw. She stepped aside reluctantly, letting him in. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, exhaling deeply before looking at her. I know you hate me right now. Mia crossed her arms. Hate isn't the right word. I feel betrayed. Deceived. Ryan swallowed hard. I never wanted to hurt you, Mia. He shook his head, frustration evident. I loved you. I knew Ethan wasn't right for you and I wanted you to see it. But I should have let you make that choice on your own. Mia studied him, her emotions tangled in a storm of love, anger, and sadness. Do you even realize what you did, Ryan? You didn't just convince me to leave Ethan. You played with my emotions. You fed into my pain, made sure I saw only the worst of him. You made me doubt myself. Ryan's eyes filled with regret. I was selfish. I thought I was saving you from heartbreak, but I ended up breaking you in a different way. Mia turned away, her fingers tightening into fists. And now I don't know what's real anymore. Ryan stepped closer. This is real, Mia. What we have, it's real. She closed her eyes, breathing in sharply. Maybe it was. But now. Now I don't know if I can ever trust you again. Ryan's jaw tightened, pain flashing in his eyes. Is this it then? Are we over? Mia hesitated. Her heart warred against her mind. Finally she whispered, I need time. Ryan exhaled slowly and nodded, his shoulders slumping. Take all the time you need. With one last lingering look he turned and walked out the door. And for the first time in years, Mia found herself completely alone. Ethan paced his apartment, his mind racing. He had done what he thought was right, he had told Mia the truth. But was that enough? For 5 years he had ignored her, taken her for granted. And now Ryan's betrayal had cracked the foundation of the life she had built. But did that mean Ethan had a second chance? Or was he simply another ghost from her past? His phone vibrated. He snatched it up, his breath catching when he saw the name on the screen. Mia. He answered immediately. Mia. Pause. Then, can we meet? Ethan's heart pounded. Of course. Where? The bridge. 8 p.m. I'll be there. As he hung up, a strange sense of hope surged through him. Maybe, just maybe, fate was giving them another chance. The bridge had always been their place. Mia arrived first, leaning against the railing, watching the water ripple below. The night air was crisp, wrapping around her like a whisper of the past. She had spent so much time here waiting for Ethan, longing for the love that had slowly faded away. And now here they were again, but this time she wasn't the same girl who had once clung to false hope. Ethan arrived minutes later, his gaze searching hers. Hey. Mia turned to face him, studying the man she had once loved with all her heart. He looked older, wearier. Life had changed them both. Hey, she said softly. Ethan leaned against the railing beside her. How are you? She let out a small, bitter chuckle. That's a loaded question. He gave her a small smile. Fair enough. Silence stretched between them before Mia finally spoke. I don't know what to do, Ethan. He looked at her, his eyes filled with sincerity. About Ryan? She nodded. I can't tell you what to do, Mia. But I can tell you this, whatever choice you make it for yourself. Not for him. Not for me. For you. Mia swallowed hard, his words cutting deep. For so long she had let her heart be pulled in different directions. First by Ethan's neglect, then by Ryan's manipulation. Maybe it was time she made a decision for herself. Ethan hesitated before adding, and if there's even the smallest part of you that still wonders. If we could have another chance. Mia held up a hand, cutting him off gently. Then I don't know. His shoulders slumped slightly, but he nodded. I understand. Mia sighed, rubbing her temples. I need space. I need to figure out who I am without you. Without Ryan. Just me. Ethan's expression was unreadable. Then he took a deep breath and smiled softly. Then that's what you should do. Mia looked up at him, surprised. Just like that. He chuckled. For the first time in my life, I don't want to be the reason you're unhappy. Mia's heart clenched at his honesty. For so long she had wanted Ethan to fight for her. But maybe this letting go, was the greatest act of love he had ever given her. Mia spent the next few weeks alone. Truly alone. She didn't call Ryan. She didn't call Ethan. Instead she focused on herself, her career, her passions, her dreams. She traveled, took up painting again and found joy in the little things. For the first time in years she wasn't defined by her relationships. She was just Mia. And it felt good. One evening as she sat in a small cafe sipping her tea she saw Ryan walk in. Their eyes met across the room and he hesitated before making his way toward her. "Hey," he said softly. Mia set down her cup. "Hey." He sat across from her, his expression unreadable. "I just wanted to check on you." She nodded. "I'm okay. Better actually." Ryan smiled sadly. "I figured." He took a deep breath. "Mia. I know I messed up. And I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to know I really did love you." Mia's chest tightened. "I know." Ryan exhaled slowly. "So. This is really it, huh?" Mia nodded. "I think it has to be." Ryan stared at her for a moment before nodding. Then, "I hope you find happiness, Mia. Even if it's not with me." She smiled softly. "And I hope you find yours too." And with that Ryan stood, gave her one last lingering look and walked away. This time she didn't chase after him. A week later, Mia stood in front of Ethan's apartment, her heart pounding. She had made her choice. Now all that was left was to tell him. Mia stood in front of Ethan's apartment door, her hands trembling. The cool evening air nipped at her skin but she barely felt it. Her heart pounded, her mind racing with the weight of the decision she had made. This was it. 4 weeks she had distanced herself from both Ryan and Ethan, allowing herself the time she had never taken before, to figure out who she truly was beyond the love and heartbreak that had defined her for so long. And now she was ready to face the truth. She raised her fist and knocked. A few moments later the door swung open and there he was, Ethan, his expression unreadable, his eyes searching hers. "Mia," he breathed. She swallowed hard. "Can I come in?" He nodded, stepping aside. The apartment was quiet, dimly lit. She noticed a half-empty glass of whiskey on the table, old letters scattered across the surface, letters she had written him years ago. She turned to face him, her heart heavy. "Ethan. I needed time to think." He exhaled slowly as if bracing himself. "And?" Mia hesitated, emotions warring inside her. Then she met his gaze and spoke the words that had been sitting on her heart. "I can't go back." Ethan's face barely changed but the light in his eyes dimmed. "I love you, Ethan. A part of me always will. But what we had, it's in the past. And I can't build my future on something that's already broken." Ethan looked down, his jaw tightening. "I understand." Mia's throat ached. "Do you?" He nodded, forcing a small smile. "Yeah. I do." Silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken words and bittersweet memories. Ethan finally spoke. I just want you to be happy, Mia." Tears pricked her eyes. "I am." She stepped forward, pressing a soft kiss to his cheek. Final goodbye. Then without looking back she walked out the door, this time knowing it was for good. Mia wandered through the city streets, the air crisp with the promise of change. She had closed the door on Ethan, on the past that had once consumed her. But there was still one more chapter left to end. And she knew exactly where she needed to go. Ryan sat in his dimly lit apartment, a glass of wine untouched on the counter. The silence was deafening but he had grown used to it. He had lost Mia. And it was his own fault. A knock at the door made him freeze. For a moment he considered ignoring it. But something told him he couldn't. When he opened the door his breath caught. Mia. Her expression was unreadable, but her presence alone was enough to make his heart ache. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. Ryan nodded, stepping aside. She walked into the apartment, glancing around. It was the same as she remembered, neat, familiar. But something about it felt. She turned to face him. "Ryan. I need to know something." He swallowed hard. Anything. Mia hesitated before asking the question that had been burning in her mind. Did you ever love me? Or was I just something you wanted to win? Ryan's face twisted with emotion. Mia, I loved you. I still love you. Her chest tightened. Then why did you do it? Why manipulate me? Why push me toward leaving Ethan instead of letting me make that choice on my own? Ryan exhaled, raking a hand through his hair. Because I was scared. I saw you suffering and I knew I could give you a better life. But you were stuck on him. You loved him, Mia, even when he ignored you. Mia flinched at the truth of his words. Ryan's voice softened. So, yeah. I did what I thought was right. I made sure you saw him for who he really was. And in the end you left him. But I should have trusted you to make that choice on your own. Mia studied him, searching for the man she had once trusted with her heart. He looked different now, older, wiser, filled with regret. She sighed, shaking her head. I don't know if I can forgive you, Ryan. He nodded slowly. I don't expect you to. But I had to tell you the truth. Mia looked away, the weight of everything pressing down on her. Then softly she spoke the words that would change everything. I'm not choosing either of you. Ryan blinked. What? Mia took a deep breath. For too long I've let my life revolve around the men I love. First Ethan, then you. But I need to choose myself this time. Ryan's face fell, but he nodded. I get it. Mia stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on his. You were a part of my life, Ryan. A big part. And I don't regret what we had. But I can't be with someone who doesn't trust me to make my own choices. Tears welled in Ryan's eyes, but he forced a smile. Then I hope you find what you're looking for, Mia. She squeezed his hand one last time. I hope you do too. Then, just as she had with Ethan, she turned and walked away. Mia didn't cry as she left Ryan's apartment. She didn't feel broken or lost. For the first time in her life she felt free. She had spent so much time trying to belong to someone else, trying to make love work when it wasn't meant to. But now she was choosing herself. And that was the most powerful choice of all. Over the next few months, Mia focused on her own happiness. She traveled, pursued new passions, reconnected with old friends. She built a life that was hers, not defined by Ethan, not defined by Ryan. Just Mia. And it was beautiful. One day as she walked through the park, she noticed a familiar figure sitting on a bench. Ethan. He looked up and their eyes met. For a moment they simply stared at each other. Then Ethan smiled. Mia. She smiled back. Ethan. He gestured to the empty space beside him. Join me. Mia hesitated. Then she nodded. She sat beside him, and for the first time in years, there was no tension, no lingering pain. Just two people who had once loved each other, now at peace with what had been. Ethan glanced at her. So, are you happy? Mia exhaled, a soft smile playing on her lips. Yes, she said simply. I really am. Ethan nodded. Good. You deserve to be. Mia turned to him, tilting her head. What about you? He chuckled. I'm getting there. Silence settled between them, but this time it was comfortable. Finally, Mia stood, stretching. Well, take care, Ethan. He looked up at her, something soft in his eyes. You too, Mia. She turned and walked away, her heart light, her future bright. For once she wasn't looking back. She was looking forward. And that was the greatest love story of all. Afterthought. Sometimes, love isn't about who we end up with, it's about finding ourselves in the process. Mia's journey wasn't about choosing between Ethan or Ryan. It was about choosing herself. And in the end, that's the most powerful love of all.